On a calm Sunday afternoon on Windsor's grounds, children from two very different royal families were gathered for what insiders referred to as a family bonding activity, starting as a lovely royal custom. One of the youngest guests was Prince George, who is assuming his heir role with quiet poise and shy power. He had gone to such events before, but always under his mother, Princess Catherine's watchful eye. But this time was different. What started out as a light-hearted interaction between step-cousins and cousins quickly took a dark turn. Soon, rumors circulated the palace that one of Camilla's grandsons had been the one to bully Prince George. Although the boy in question from Camilla's Parker BS lineage was not yet a named royal, Camilla had been putting in a lot of effort behind the scenes to raise awareness of her family. She had battled for small ceremonial roles, prestigious education, and even modest title affiliations. The majority of the royal family remained silent until Prince George returned home in tears, at which point everything changed, despite some members of the family privately criticizing her efforts as being excessive. It was Kate who first noticed the stoop in his shoulders, the quiet, and the watery eyes. When she inquired about what transpired, George gave her the most candid explanation a toddler can give. The taunting had been more than just personal. His position as the future king was mocked. It had been intentional. The boy who had grown up hearing too many adult whispers at home reportedly turned nasty and made fun of his family, his habits, and even his late grandmother, Diana, according to palace insiders. Kate was enraged. Behind the royal gates, William was devastated. Someone had crossed a queue. It was a swift, silent, and explosive event. A decision made by Prince William would have a significant impact on royal history. Any future title consideration would be taken away from Camilla's grandchild, who was supposed to receive honorary status within the monarchy. No more talking, there are no second chances or a soft transition into royal events. The palace has refused to make an internal statement available to the public, but the walls are trembling. It is believed that Camilla is furious. Charles, who is divided between his wife and child, has kept his hands off, which some believe says a lot. How about the general public? Because protecting the next generation is the most important thing in a bloodline-based monarchy. They are keeping an eye on everything they do, reading between the lines and making decisions. This time, Prince George wasn't just protected, he was avenged. It was supposed to be a fun, upbeat occasion. The purpose of this manufactured royal family day was to remind the public and media that the Windsors are just like any other family, despite the jewels and formality. The stunning private grounds of Balmoral served as the backdrop. In front of their parents and nannies, a big picnic had been prepared, with soft tartan blankets spread out on the lawn, golden corgis running around, and royal kids running between games and food. However, nobody could have foreseen how badly things would fall apart, and no royal assistant could keep it in check. King Charles himself had organized the day because he thought it was time to fix hidden flaws beneath the surface. He believed that bringing Camilla's grandchildren and Prince William's children together in a laid-back environment would strengthen their bond. The Queen Consort enthusiastically concurred, wanting to further incorporate her family into the royal spotlight. Although not everyone shared her opinion, she saw the event as more than just a picnic. It was a subtly assertive power move that gave her family visibility, recognition, and even affection. Despite her reputation for diplomacy, Princess Catherine was initially apprehensive, as royal aides later disclosed. Especially to insiders, she was unhappy about the prospect of her kids, especially Prince George and Camilla's more talkative kids, being forced to mix. George was, after all, being raised with the expectation of a future crown. He was instilled with the values of duty, honor, and humility at a young age. For Camilla's extended family, who were raised in more relaxed environments and reportedly had far fewer restrictions, the same could not be said. The trouble started in the middle of the afternoon. The children were encouraged to play together in a loosely supervised section of the gardens, while the parents sipped tea beneath a marquee tent. Several accounts claimed that a homemade football game turned nasty after words were exchanged and things became more sinister. First about the game, then about personal issues. Camilla's eldest grandchild started to torment George. One child was heard asking, "Why are you walking like that? Do you believe that you are superior to everyone? Because of your silly crown." What might have been written off as childish jeering became something awful. According to one aide who later briefed a senior staffer, Prince George, who had just turned 11, attempted to escape but was chased and made fun of for having special training status as the chosen one. He was even called a mummy's boy, a sensitive trigger for a child whose late grandmother, Princess Diana, is revered almost as a sacred memory. Although the staff acted swiftly to separate the kids, the harm had already been done. George was shaken, even though he had typically remained calm in public. To keep him out of the spotlight, a family bodyguard was discreetly sent in to take him away. The remainder of the afternoon was characterized by awkward smiles and forced conversations after Catherine was told that her son was already crying in the car. Catherine's close friends reported, Camilla was stone-faced, her smiles wan and her grip on Charlotte's hand firmer than usual when they returned to their private apartment. Camilla, who was presumably unaware of the full gravity of what had happened or preferred not to acknowledge it, continued her hosting duties. Kate demanded that George give a thorough explanation. She was stunned by what she heard. The bullying wasn't merely cruel, it was accurate and deliberate, mimicking adult sentiments and language, suggesting that Camilla's grandson was repeating what he had heard at home. Kate was most surprised by that. Not only the violence of children, but also the poison of adult bigotry transmitted through looks and whispers. George went to bed early, red-eyed and withdrawn, and Prince William was briefed right away. William sat quietly with his wife. The familiar sting of history repeating itself was the source of the pain on his face, not just for George. This time, however, he would not remain silent. There would be repercussions, and he was resolved to protect his son at all costs. That night, the tension was evident as the car got closer to Adelaide Cottage. Since leaving Balmoral, Prince George had remained silent. His reserved manner, which was usually a sign of civility, was now tinged with embarrassment. Princess Catherine's maternal instincts suddenly came into play as she sat next to him, her hand gently resting on his back. Kate gently asked George, "Tell me exactly what happened," as she sat him aside from the royal guest and prying eyes. She was devastated by what happened next. The name-calling, the ridiculing, the sarcastic comment about his father being a future puppet king, the nasty taunt that he was only loved for his status, and worst of all, Princess Diana's name was made fun of and spat out like a joke. George first explained this haltingly, then confidently as his mother listened carefully. Halfway to a top royal aide, Kate's face changed. Her normally serene and collected eyes turned cold with rage. Not the explosive rage one might expect, but the terrifying steel-backed rage of a mother whose child had suffered emotional harm. Kate's precise remarks were succinct and straightforward. "That boy will not be near my children again." She meant it. The organization had been quietly pressuring Kate for years. She had stood patiently as Camilla's family was brought closer to the center of the monarchy, smiled through scandal, and moved gracefully through the royal system. But for any mother, much less a prospective queen, this was excessive. She had informed William about what went on outside Adelaide Cottage's walls in less than an hour. One reliable source claimed that it was the couple's most emotionally charged talk in years. Kate didn't cry or speak louder. She did, however, make it apparent that she would take action if William did not. She brought up Diana, how the system had let her down, and how small problems had turned into catastrophes. "George will not feel insecure in his own family as he grows up. You're the heir, start acting like it," she allegedly said. After listening, William nodded. Kate turned down every scheduled engagement the next morning. In silent protest, she cancelled her meetings and stayed at home with George and Charlotte. "I want this documented," she demanded of Palisades behind the scenes. She wanted the events to be documented in writing, not dismissed, not rewarded, and not spun. Charles's private secretary received a message the next morning. It was succinct and direct. "Prince George has been involved in an incident. A private meeting with His Majesty has been requested by the Prince and Princess of Wales. The meeting took place in a day." According to reports, Camilla dismissed the entire situation as childish squabbling. Even though King Charles showed sympathy, she laughed off the question of whether her grandson would receive reprimands. She allegedly said, "They'll forget this in a week. They're only children." Kate didn't have to answer, so it was clear to the palace from her hard, silent glare and firm hold on George's future that she was more than just the Princess of Wales. She was a mother, and the argument had just become personal. Despite spending a large portion of his life balancing his allegiance to his father with his respect for the throne, Prince William was never free from the sorrowful legacy of his mother. But there was no question about his own son. There was no respect for protocol, no diplomacy. Within him, something had changed. When William returned to Kensington Palace the day after his private meeting with King Charles, he made a decision that even his closest advisors were taken aback by. Camilla's grandson will not inherit a regal title. Not now, not ever, he said. After gathering his senior team and pacing the floor of his private study, this brings it to a close. No conversation took place. There is no mediation and no royal committee. William's decision alone was significant, but so was the fact that he took the initiative without first getting Charles's or the palace machine's approval. Through discreetly requesting public recognition, honorary positions, and subtly participating in state events, Camilla has been progressively bringing her children and grandchildren closer to royal legitimacy for years. Although the general public had not noticed the gradual encroachment, William had, and now that George was upset and Camilla was denying responsibility, he saw it for what it was, an obvious attempt to include her family in the future will of the monarchy. That was unacceptable to me. More than just a mischievous youngster, the boy who made fun of George embodied everything that was wrong with Camilla's abuse of her position in the royal family, including exploiting Charles's guilt, playing on his age, and obfuscating the lines between duty and favoritism. William's message was clear-cut. Royal privilege is earned via service, respect, and above all, honor, rather than by birth. The prince's tone at internal briefings was described as glacial by an insider close to him. William responded ruthlessly when one of the aides hesitantly inquired as to whether a private apology from Camilla's family would make things better. "My son does not require an apology, he requires protection." He later adopted an even more adamant position, declaring that Camilla's grandson would no longer be allowed to attend future family get-togethers with his own kids, not on holidays or for birthdays. If Camilla's grandson is with George, Charlotte, or Louis, there won't be any troop in the colour rehearsals. This was an ultimatum, not a negotiation. Immediately, word spread throughout the royal community. Charles was taken aback and reportedly paced his study in silence after hearing of his son's decision. He had expected the situation to end amicably, but William, who was usually composed and cooperative, had drawn a line, and the most heartbreaking part was that he did not flinch for William. This was more than just discipline. It was about sending a message to the entire organization, not just to Camilla. The days of tolerating disrespect for Diana's legacy or his own children were over. He had been patient for years, but as George gained more notoriety, William made it clear that he would act as a shield, a lion, a father first, a future monarch second, and that no child related to Camilla, no matter how near the throne they may appear to be, would ever wear a royal title under his watch. At first, Camilla didn't believe the news. While enjoying her afternoon tea in her private drawing room at Clarence House, a senior staff member discreetly informed her that Prince William had not only refused her grandson the honorary title, but also prohibited him from participating in royal family events that involved his children. The room's temperature fluctuated. At first, Camilla wrote it off as a misunderstanding. "That can't be right," she said adamantly. Charles would never permit it. However, as the full facts became clear, William's direct encounter with the king, his refusal to accept an apology, and his official documentation of the event, reality set in. She set down the teacup with trembling hands. "He's gone too far," Camilla shot back, barely controlling her anger. "It's vindictive and personal. This is punishment, not justice." Camilla was worried about legacy as much as her grandson's actions. Her children and grandchildren were kept apart from the monarchy. They were treated as outsiders rather than members of the royal family. Despite the lengthy battles she had fought to make her family feel like they belonged to the monarchy when she married Charles. She had tried to include them in the royal rhythm over the years, but she had accepted it up until this point. An honorary school invitation, a seat at a Jubilee performance there, a walk in a procession here, and subtly positioning oneself for public prominence. Although it wasn't official, it was intentional. She wanted history to demonstrate the significance of the Parker Bowles name and the fact that her family was more than just luggage. Rather, they were a crucial part of the crown's fate. And now William had shattered that fantasy with a single, forceful action. Camilla reportedly barged into Charles's study with the letter William had delivered via official channels because she wanted an immediate meeting with him. Her voice echoed down the passage, a rare sound in the palace. "He made us look bad, and he made me look bad." As a kid, however. As a child, Charles was worn out and weaker due to the rules and did not fully support her. The king was divided, according to those close to him. He sympathized with Camilla, no doubt, but he also saw the wider picture. Charles, whose reign was already tainted by popular disbelief, couldn't afford another feud with his successor, and William was solidifying his power as both the son and the heir. "I will not overrule him," he said, something Camilla did not want to hear. Charles gently retorted, "We have to respect that he is in charge of protecting his family." According to reports, Camilla's face went pale. She reportedly turned on her heel, left the room and slammed the door, shocking the nearby staff with her unusual violation of protocol. Nobody believed her when she claimed to have a migraine to cancel her public appearance that evening. The anger had not lessened, rather, it had simply moved underground. According to those close to her, who said she remained silent during dinner and refused to acknowledge William's name. This is something she will always remember. According to reports, a senior palace official said, "Camilla may smile in public, but behind the scenes, a line has been crossed." She now views William as a threat rather than as her stepson. Camilla had played the long game for decades, but William had shown something terrible in a single move. She had lost, and the game was over. Prince George has captured hearts in a way that few others have, and the British public has always had a deep emotional attachment to the royal family's children, especially those who are directly descended from the throne. Many believe that the young child who once held his father's hand during royal engagements and grinned awkwardly in front of the cameras represents the dignity, tenacity, and grace of the monarchy in the future. Thus, the public's attention abruptly turned to the palace when word initially leaked out about a troubling incident involving George and Camilla's grandson. The tabloids started dropping clues, obviously briefed by inside sources but careful not to break protocol. It didn't take long for the pieces to fit together, and then the flashpoint headline appeared. Headlines like "Heir targeted during private family event" and "Royal rift behind closed doors" were sufficient to spark interest. After being made fun of by William, Prince George's step relation, he replies with a title ban. Within hours, the story went viral on royal forums. Expressions of grief for George and anger at Camilla's supporters erupted in Facebook comment sections and Twitter threads. Many of the thousands of additional comments that followed said the same thing. Diana would be proud of William for protecting that boy. The irony that Camilla, who was once accused of tearing the royal family apart, now had a grandson who had crossed a similar line, and that Diana's grandson bore the consequences, was openly pointed out by some observers, who even connected the dots. As artists shared sketches of a young prince with calm pride wearing a miniature crown, the term Team George began to trend on social media. "George is more royal at 11 than many grown-ups will ever be," read one widely shared message. "This has to do with behavior, not genetics." A former palace press secretary told a morning news show that royal experts also paid attention. Prince William's decision to put his family before politics was a turning point, and the public responded with resounding support. Royal aides observed a big change behind the scenes. Within a week of the news breaking, Camilla's previous period of sluggish public acceptance, especially after the late Queen's attempt to soften her image as Queen Consort, started to wane. While William and Kate's numbers soared, Camilla's popularity fell precipitously in polls. The public, which had previously shown protection for Kate and her kids, suddenly viewed them as the winners of their fight and the victims of unfair treatment. The senior courtiers of Wales, many of whom had served under Diana and subtly supported William's actions, were well liked, even within the palace. The monarchy needs this: strength, boundaries, and someone who refuses to let tradition justify bad behavior, according to one advisor. Parents from all over the United Kingdom wrote to Kate to tell her about their own children being mistreated and to thank her for standing up for her child. She was moved to tears by some of the messages, but the most memorable part happened a week later when William and Kate made a modest Sunday church appearance. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause as George and Charlotte got out of the car. It wasn't a boisterous or theatrical moment, rather it was a courteous, informed, and kind principle. In the centuries-long history of the British monarchy, numerous conflicts have been fought in whispers behind gilded doors under the weight of convention and in the shadow of history. But this time something seemed different. It was not a conflict over policy or protocol, but rather one of personal protection for his son. Kate understood the gesture completely, leaning down, squeezing his hand and saying something that the cameras couldn't hear, but what mattered most was that people were clearly watching and unquestionably on his side. No other monarch has dared to cross that line so openly since Prince William did. Camilla had worked for years to change public opinion, bring her family closer to the throne, and change the past she had initially sought to put behind her. However, all of that painstaking work was undone in a matter of days, not because of politics or scandal, but rather because a child was hurt. The father and mother of the child refused to keep quiet. Despite his youth, George now has a silent victory, a resounding indication that his family will always support him after Kate stood her ground with grace and William acted with conviction. Titles will no longer be given out through shady means as the monarchy changes. Peace will no longer come at the cost of silence. The throne's future lies in integrity, which Prince William has shown he is prepared to uphold at all costs, not in ceremonies or Camilla, who had been steadily gaining ground, is now even more alone. The consequences of one moment have diminished for the Parker BS family's future prospects, and her grandson's position in the royal spotlight is no longer there. A savage encounter has sent shockwaves through the kingdom, even though the dust hasn't settled yet. One thing is clear from the silence: a new royal standard has been set. Respect should be reciprocated, and titles must be earned. The heirs to the throne have no second chances. This was not merely a family dispute, rather it was a redefinition of power, and it was drafted with a mother's will and a father's voice, rather than with swords or speeches. The monarchy will never be the same after this.